Before I tell you what happened to those 4 men, I need to ask you something. Have you ever stood in a place that every map says doesn't exist? Not an abandoned town. Not some forgotten back road. I mean a location that every chart, every atlas, every government record insists is empty forest. Yet you're standing right there, looking at it with your own 2 eyes. Because if that's ever happened to you, I want to know where. Drop it in the comments. I read every single one. Some of the places you've mentioned over the years have actually led me down rabbit holes I never expected. And tonight's case, it came from one of those very places. Nearly 70 years later, nobody has ever explained what happened in Black Hollow, Virginia. And honestly, I'm not sure anyone ever will. Here's the thing about Western Virginia. The folks there don't talk about Black Hollow. Some will tell you it never existed. Others will say it burned down before their grandparents were born. But the old families, the ones who've been there for generations, they just change the subject. The moment you mention the name, suddenly they remember they left something on the stove. That silence is what caught my attention. Because when a place disappears, people usually remember why. Black Hollow was different. They remembered, all right. They just refused to say it out loud. The official record is laughably thin. 38 pages total. Most of them water damaged. Several names blacked out completely. 3 witness statements. 1 sheriff's report. A faded survey map. And a leather notebook found almost 40 years later. Hidden inside the wall of an abandoned courthouse. That's it. But those few pages describe one of the strangest disappearances I've ever encountered. And not because people vanished. People vanish all the time. Hunters, hikers, families packing up and leaving without warning. That happens. No. This case included something far harder to explain. Every single witness described hearing the exact same church bell from a church that had already been demolished nearly 20 years before. Let me take you back. Autumn 1934. The Great Depression had left entire counties barely scraping by. Coal companies were abandoning mines left and right. Families were loading up wagons and heading out of the mountains. Entire communities just stopped existing. One of those places was supposed to be Black Hollow. According to state records, every resident had relocated by 1928. The school closed. The post office shut down. The church was dismantled. By 1930, government maps marked the valley as unoccupied woodland. Nothing remained. At least, that was the official version. Then, in October 1934, the Appalachian Land Survey Commission got an unusual request. A timber company had just purchased nearly 6,000 acres of mountain forest bordering Pike County. Before they could start logging, surveyors needed to confirm the property boundaries. Simple work. Routine. Usually finished in less than a week, the job went to a respected survey engineer named Thomas Mercer, 46 years old, Army veteran, methodical, quiet. The kind of man who trusted numbers more than superstition. Mercer had spent nearly 20 years mapping forests across Virginia, Kentucky, and West Virginia. If anyone could sort out confusing mountain boundaries, it was him. He selected 3 men to accompany him. His assistant, Daniel Brooks, 28, former schoolteacher, skilled with drafting equipment, always carried a small notebook filled with observations about birds and weather. The company's representative, Harold Bishop, 39, well-dressed, soft-spoken, never traveled without a polished leather briefcase containing every legal document related to the purchase. And finally, their local guide, a man almost everyone simply called Elias Boone. Nobody knew exactly how old Boone was. Some guessed 60. Others thought closer to 75. The mountains had a way of aging people unevenly. His beard had turned completely white years earlier, but his back remained perfectly straight. He'd guided hunters, loggers, moonshiners, and lost children through those mountains longer than anyone could remember. If Boone said a trail existed, it existed. If Boone refused to take a trail, people usually stopped asking why. They met at a small general store outside Pine Ridge on October 11th. The store belonged to Martha Ellison, a widow in her 50s, known throughout the county for remembering everyone's name and forgetting nothing. She watched the strangers unload surveying equipment while Boone quietly checked supplies. Then she noticed something. Harold Bishop had unfolded an old county map across the porch railing. His finger rested directly over one location, Black Hollow. Martha stared at it for several seconds. Then she slowly folded the map shut herself. "You don't want to go there." Bishop smiled politely. "We're only marking property lines." She didn't smile back. "There aren't any property lines there." Mercer stepped forward. "The state map disagrees." Martha looked at him. "No," she said softly. "The state map forgot." That sentence stuck with Mercer far longer than he expected. The state map forgot. It sounded ridiculous. Maps don't forget. People do. But he noticed something strange. Inside the store, everyone had become unusually quiet. A farmer who'd been drinking coffee set his cup down without finishing it. Two hunters exchanged a nervous glance. An elderly woman immediately slipped out through the back door. No one argued. No one laughed. No one even looked toward the map again. That evening, Boone sat alone outside sharpening his old hunting knife. Mercer joined him. "You've been there before." Boone nodded once. "A long time ago." "What happened?" The old guide continued sharpening the blade. Finally, he spoke. "The mountain keeps what belongs to it." Mercer smiled. "I'm asking seriously?" "So am I." Silence. The wind moved through the pine trees. Far below, somewhere beyond the hills, a dog barked once, then stopped. Boone looked toward the darkness. "If we hear a church bell tomorrow," he said quietly, "don't count how many times it rings." Mercer frowned. "There isn't a church anywhere near Black Hollow." Boone slid the knife back into its worn leather sheath. "I know." They left before sunrise. The truck could only go so far along the old logging road. Beyond that, they continued on foot. October air cold enough to see every breath, leaves covering the trail in deep shades of crimson and gold. For nearly 4 hours, everything felt normal. Birds filled the forest. Squirrels darted between oak trees. Mercer recorded bearings every quarter mile. Brooks sketched terrain features. Bishop reviewed deeds while walking. Boone said almost nothing. Just after noon, they reached an old stone bridge crossing a narrow creek. Except the bridge wasn't on any map. Mercer stopped, checked his compass, checked again, unfolded every survey sheet he carried. Nothing. No bridge. No creek crossing. Brooks looked downstream. "There are wagon tracks. Fresh. Not old. Someone had crossed recently." Bishop smiled. "Maybe the maps are outdated." Boone's face remained expressionless. "No." He looked at the bridge for several long seconds, then whispered something Mercer barely heard. It moved. Mercer looked up sharply. "What moved?" Boone didn't answer. He walked across the bridge alone. Halfway across, he suddenly stopped. His shoulders became perfectly still. He wasn't looking ahead. He was listening. The others waited. The forest had gone strangely quiet. No birds, no insects, no wind. Then, very faintly, somewhere beyond the trees, a church bell rang. One slow, hollow note. Boone closed his eyes. Without turning around, he spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. "Don't count." Nobody moved. The sound of that single church bell seemed to hang over the valley long after it had stopped ringing. Mercer slowly turned toward Boone. "What church?" The old guide never answered. Instead, he crouched beside the trail and pressed his weathered hand into the damp soil. For nearly 30 seconds, he simply stayed there, listening. Not to the forest, but to the ground itself. Finally he stood. "We're late." Mercer frowned. "It's barely 1 o'clock." Boone looked directly into his eyes. "No, we're late." Daniel Brooks checked his pocket watch. 1:17 p.m. Harold Bishop checked his expensive wristwatch. 1:16. Mercer looked at his own. 1:18. 3 different watches. 3 different times. Only by a minute or two, but enough to make every surveyor uncomfortable. Professional survey work depended on precision. 1 minute could become 100 feet of error. Mercer laughed quietly. Cold weather. Metal contracts. Happens. No one answered. The forest ahead looked older. Much older. The oak trees grew farther apart. Massive chestnuts, trees believed extinct after the blight, stood untouched across the hillsides. Mercer stopped beneath one enormous trunk. "This shouldn't be here." Brooks nodded. "They disappeared years ago." Boone quietly replied. "They disappeared somewhere else." They continued walking. The trail narrowed until it almost vanished beneath thick moss. Then something else changed. The air. It became strangely warm. Not summer warm, more like the warmth inside an occupied house during winter. Mercer removed his coat. So much for October. Brooks looked uneasy. "We climbed higher. It should be colder." Nobody argued. An hour later, they found the fence. It stretched through the woods in a perfectly straight line. Old cedar posts. Hand-forged iron wire. Not rusted. Not broken. Not leaning. As though someone had repaired it yesterday. Mercer unfolded the county survey. "There shouldn't be fencing here." Bishop smiled. "Perhaps another company already claimed the land." Boone slowly shook his head. "No company ever came this far." Mercer examined the posts. Fresh axe marks. Fresh wood shavings. Fresh footprints. Someone had been working here recently. The footprints bothered Brooks immediately. There were dozens of them. Large boots. Children's shoes. Women's heels. Bare feet. All mixed together. But every track pointed only one direction. Into Black Hollow. None came back. Mercer measured several prints. "They're recent." Boone quietly corrected him. "They're not." Mercer looked up. "The edges aren't weathered. They should be less than a week old." Boone's expression never changed. "They've looked like that for years." Nobody laughed. Around mid-afternoon, they finally reached the ridge overlooking the valley. Mercer expected abandoned ruins, collapsed cabins, broken chimneys, maybe an old church foundation. Instead, he saw smoke, fresh smoke, rising lazily through golden autumn trees. Someone was burning firewood. Brooks whispered, "People live here." Bishop smiled with relief. "I told you. The records must simply be wrong." Boone remained perfectly still. "No, the records are right." They descended carefully. The valley opened beneath them. And suddenly, Black Hollow appeared. Not abandoned. Not ruined. Alive. Children chased each other between wooden houses. Laundry fluttered from clotheslines. Dogs barked behind white fences. Women swept front porches. A blacksmith hammered glowing iron inside an open workshop. Somewhere, someone played a fiddle. Mercer stopped walking. "This is impossible." According to every government document, this town had ceased to exist 6 years earlier. Yet everything below looked ordinary, comfortably ordinary, almost peaceful. Then every person in town stopped moving. At exactly the same moment, the blacksmith lowered his hammer. Children froze in place. Women stopped sweeping. Even the dogs became silent. Dozens of faces slowly turned toward the 4 strangers standing on the ridge. Nobody waved. Nobody smiled. Nobody spoke. They simply watched, as though they had been expecting visitors. Harold Bishop straightened his jacket. "I'll handle this." He walked downhill alone. Mercer started after him, but Boone caught his arm. "Let him." "Why?" "He hasn't been invited yet." Mercer stared. "What does that even mean?" Boone never answered. Bishop reached the first house. A woman stood on the porch, perhaps 40 years old. Gray dress, dark hair tied neatly behind her head. She smiled warmly. "Welcome. We weren't expecting guests today." Bishop introduced himself. "My name is Harold Bishop. I'm representing Appalachian Timber Holdings. We recently acquired this property." The woman's smile never faded. "I'm afraid," she said softly, "you didn't." Behind her, another church bell rang. One slow note. Brooks instinctively counted 1. Before anyone could stop him, the bell rang again. 2. Then again. 3. Boone's face turned white. "Daniel," he whispered, "stop counting." Brooks blinked. "What?" "The bell. It only rang 3. Boone grabbed him violently by the shoulder. I sighed, "Steop." The entire town became silent again. Even the wind disappeared. Every resident, every child, every dog was staring directly at Daniel Brooks. Not angry, not curious, hungry. Brooks felt his stomach tighten. I didn't mean." The woman on the porch interrupted gently. He heard it. Another bell. 4. Brooks couldn't help himself. His lips moved automatically. 4. Mercer's blood ran cold. Brooks wasn't choosing to count anymore. The numbers were speaking themselves. 5, 5, 6, 6. His voice sounded distant, sleepy, like someone talking while dreaming. Boone pulled a small leather pouch from inside his coat. He threw a handful of gray ash toward Brooks. The wind caught it. The ash struck Brooks across the face. Instantly, the counting stopped. Brooks collapsed onto his knees, breathing hard, confused. What just happened?" Boone answered without taking his eyes off the townspeople. "You listened too long." The smiling woman slowly stepped down from her porch. One step, then another. Her feet made no sound. Neither did anyone else's. She stopped several yards away. "We've been waiting." She looked directly at Boone. "You always come back." Boone closed his eyes. "I've never been here." The woman smiled wider. "Not yet." Mercer suddenly noticed something that made every hair on his neck stand up. Every building, every fence, every wagon cast shadows. Except the people. The townsfolk stood in bright afternoon sunlight, without a single shadow touching the ground. Mercer whispered, "Boone." The old guide nodded. "I know." Without looking away, he quietly said something Mercer would remember for the rest of his life. "We're already too late." Just then, the church bell rang again. This time it didn't stop. The church bell continued to ring, not loudly, not violently. Slow, steady, patient. Each toll rolled through Black Hollow like distant thunder trapped beneath the mountains. Mercer instinctively reached for his pocket watch. The second hand had stopped, not broken. Stopped, frozen between 2 numbers. Daniel Brooks checked his own. The hands were spinning backward. Harold Bishop looked down at his polished wristwatch. It displayed no time at all, only a perfectly blank white face. No one spoke. Even the townspeople remained completely still. The only sound was the bell. Boone slowly removed his old felt hat. "Don't look toward the church." Mercer frowned. "How are we supposed to avoid looking?" "You'll know when it wants you to." That answer explained nothing. Yet Mercer obeyed. Something deep inside him already believed the old guide. The smiling woman stepped closer. "My name is Eleanor. You've traveled a long way." Harold Bishop straightened his jacket. "We're only here to verify property boundaries." Eleanor smiled. "You crossed them an hour ago." Mercer interrupted. "This town isn't supposed to exist." For the first time, the woman's expression changed. Not anger, not fear, pity. "That's what they told you," she said quietly. She motioned toward the center of town. "If you're cold, come inside." No one moved. Boone answered first. "We won't stay. You already have." The words settled over the group like heavy fog. A young boy suddenly appeared beside Eleanor, perhaps 10 years old. Freckles, brown suspenders, bare feet. He held a wooden spinning top in one hand. He looked directly at Daniel Brooks. "You're the first one." Brooks forced a smile. The first what? The first to hear the bell today. The boy spun his toy across the dusty road. Instead of falling, it continued spinning. Longer, longer, longer. Nearly a full minute, without slowing. Mercer knelt beside it. The toy wasn't touching the ground. It floated, barely half an inch above the dirt. Still spinning, perfectly balanced. Mercer reached toward it. Boone grabbed his wrist. No. Why? It doesn't belong here anymore. Mercer slowly pulled his hand back. The spinning top immediately dropped. Rolled twice. Stopped. The boy picked it up, smiled politely, and walked away. The group continued cautiously into town. Everything looked painfully normal. Fresh bread cooled on windowsills. Smoke drifted lazily from chimneys. A barber swept hair from his doorway. An elderly woman watered flowers. Yet something remained terribly wrong. Nobody cast a shadow. Not one person. Mercer deliberately looked beneath every porch, every wagon, every tree. Objects had shadows. Animals had shadows. Buildings had shadows. Only the people stood untouched by sunlight. Then Brooks noticed something else. Mercer. He pointed toward a row of parked automobiles. There shouldn't be cars like that. Mercer looked carefully. A shiny black sedan. A pickup truck. 2 family wagons. They looked brand new. Except their designs belonged to different decades. One vehicle resembled something from 1915. Another looked 20 years newer. One had license plates Mercer had never seen before. Different years. Different eras. Parked together, as though time itself had forgotten how to arrange them. Harold Bishop tried to remain practical. People replace cars. Mercer quietly replied, not with ones that haven't been invented yet. Bishop stared. What? Mercer pointed. Look at the windshield. The glass curved smoothly around the corners. No automobile manufacturer had ever built such a windshield. Not in 1934. Bishop looked away. He didn't want to think about it. They reached the center of town. There stood the church. White wood. Tall steeple. Fresh paint. Clean windows. The bell continued ringing inside. Slow. Measured. Patient. Mercer immediately noticed something impossible. The bell rope hanging inside the open doorway wasn't moving. No one pulled it. Yet the bell continued ringing. Boone refused to step closer. This is far enough. Eleanor turned toward him. You've been here before. No. You just don't remember. Before Boone could answer, the church door slowly opened wider. No wind. No person. It simply opened. The interior beyond remained completely dark. Too dark. Even with afternoon sunlight pouring through the entrance. Mercer couldn't see a single pew. Not one window. Only darkness. And somewhere inside, the steady ringing. Then someone spoke. Not loudly. Not from outside, from within the church. Thomas. Mercer's heart stopped. That voice belonged to his father. Impossible. His father had died 12 years earlier. Mercer stared toward the doorway. Another voice. Sheriff Bishop. Harold Bishop's face drained of color. My mother, he whispered. She had died during the influenza epidemic of 1919. Daniel Brooks suddenly gasped. His own name echoed softly from inside. In the unmistakable voice of his younger sister. The sister buried at age 11. Boone shouted. Don't answer, none of them did. But every voice continued calling. Softly, lovingly, patiently, not demanding, inviting. As though someone familiar waited just beyond the doorway. Mercer took one involuntary step forward. The voices became clearer. His father laughed, exactly as he remembered. Tom, come help me. Another step. Then Boone struck Mercer across the chest with the wooden handle of his walking stick. The sharp pain snapped him back. Mercer stumbled, blinking rapidly. The voices vanished. What did you do? Boone looked genuinely frightened. It almost had you. Suddenly, the church bell stopped. Silence. Complete, absolute, no birds, no wind, nothing. Every resident of Black Hollow slowly turned toward the church. One by one. Children, mothers, Old men, shopkeepers, everyone. Their smiles disappeared. Their faces became completely expressionless. They weren't looking at the church. They were waiting for something to come out. The church door opened wider. A cold wind rushed across the street. Mercer expected someone to emerge. No one did. Instead, footprints began appearing in the dust. One after another. Fresh impressions. As though invisible feet walked slowly down the church step, across the road, toward them. Crunch. Another print. Crunch. Another. Mercer watched in horror. Nothing visible created them. Only empty air, yet whatever approached was getting closer. Boone whispered only 4 words. "We leave. Right now." Nobody argued. They turned toward the trail, but Black Hollow was gone. The road they had entered from no longer existed. Behind them stretched only endless forest. No ridge. No path. No bridge. Nothing. They were trapped. Then, for the very first time, every person in town spoke together. Perfectly synchronized. In the exact same calm voice. "You counted the bell." The words echoed through the valley. You counted the bell. Not shouted. Not whispered. Simply spoken. Hundreds of voices. Perfectly synchronized. As though the entire town shared one pair of lungs. Mercer slowly turned in a complete circle. The trail behind them was gone. The ridge had disappeared. Even the stone bridge they'd crossed less than 2 hours earlier had vanished. Every direction looked identical. Rows of weathered houses, golden maple trees, white fences, smoke rising lazily into an impossibly still sky. Daniel Brooks swallowed hard. What came down that hill? Harold Bishop looked back toward the church. There isn't any hill. There wasn't. The ground behind them stretched perfectly flat, for as far as they could see. Boone's weathered face had become almost colorless. He reached inside his coat and removed a folded piece of yellow cloth. Carefully, he tied it around the handle of his walking stick. Mercer watched him. "What is that?" "My wife's apron." Mercer looked confused. "I thought you said she died years ago." The Boone nodded. "She did." "Then why carry it?" The old guide stared toward the church. "So she can find me if I don't." No one asked another question. The invisible footsteps continued. Crunch, crunch, crunch. The sound stopped only a few feet away. Mercer looked down. Fresh footprints ended in the middle of the dusty road. Nothing stood there. Yet every instinct inside him screamed someone was watching them. Then the church door slowly closed. By itself. The bell fell silent. Immediately, every resident returned to whatever they had been doing before. Children laughed. Dogs barked. A blacksmith resumed hammering iron. Women continued hanging laundry. It was as though the last several minutes had never happened. Only the 4 outsiders remained frozen. Eleanor smiled again. "You should eat." Harold Bishop almost laughed. "After everything we've just seen, you'll need your strength." "No." Her smile never changed. "You already said yes." Mercer frowned. "I didn't." Eleanor tilted her head. "Not yet." Those 2 words settled into Mercer's mind like a splinter. Not yet. She had used them before. So had Boone, as though time itself wasn't moving in a straight line inside Black Hollow. They followed Eleanor into the old boarding house near the town square. The building smelled of fresh bread, wood smoke, and something older, something hidden beneath both. The dining room contained 6 neatly arranged tables, white tablecloths, fresh flowers, warm food waiting on every plate, roast chicken, cornbread, green beans, apple pie cooling beside the windows. The meal looked perfect, almost too perfect. Daniel realized something first. There aren't any flies. Everyone looked around, he was right. Not a single insect. Not even near the cooling pies. No buzzing, no ants, no spiders, nothing. A house in the Appalachian Mountains filled with warm food should have been alive with insects. Instead, it was unnaturally clean. Boone refused to sit. "Don't eat." Eleanor looked disappointed. They're hungry. They'll stay hungry. You know the rules. I know enough. Mercer finally asked the question none of them had dared to voice. What exactly is this place? Eleanor answered without hesitation. It's home. For who? For everyone who arrives. Silence. Harold Bishop suddenly stood. I've had enough. He slammed his leather briefcase onto the table. The company owns this land. We have legal deeds. We have state records. We have... Eleanor interrupted gently. You have paper. She looked directly into his eyes. We have time. For reasons Mercer couldn't explain, those words frightened him more than anything else she'd said. Bishop angrily opened the briefcase. I'll prove it. Inside lay every survey map, every ownership document, every contract. Except they weren't there anymore. The briefcase contained only photographs. Dozens of them. Old black and white photographs. Bishop frowned. These aren't mine. He picked one up. His hand began shaking. The photograph showed himself, standing beside the church outside, smiling. Mercer leaned closer. It was definitely Bishop. Same clothes, same face, same leather briefcase. Only the photograph looked decades old. Its edges had yellowed with age. Another photograph. Daniel Brooks, standing beside children in front of the schoolhouse, smiling. Another. Thomas Mercer, holding surveying equipment near the church. Older, much older, gray hair, wrinkled face. Yet unmistakably Thomas Mercer. Mercer's breathing became uneven. This isn't possible. Eleanor quietly replied. It hasn't happened yet. Boone immediately closed the briefcase. Don't look anymore. Mercer grabbed his arm. What are those? The old guide answered slowly. Memories. No, they're photographs. Boone looked directly at him. Same thing. Outside, the church bell rang once. Every resident stopped eating, stopped walking, stopped talking. No one looked frightened. Instead, they looked expectant, almost happy. A young girl entered the dining room, perhaps 8 years old. She carried a tiny bouquet of wildflowers. Without speaking, she walked directly toward Boone. She offered him the flowers. Boone stared at her. His eyes slowly filled with tears. Mercer had never seen the old guide show emotion before. Not once. Not until now. The little girl smiled. You promised. Boone's lips trembled. I know you. You should. She gently took his hand. My name is Sarah. Boone suddenly staggered backward. The flowers fell onto the wooden floor. No, he whispered. No. Mercer caught him before he collapsed. What is it? Boone couldn't answer. He simply stared at the little girl. Finally, he managed only 4 broken words. That's my daughter. Mercer froze. You said she died. Boone nodded slowly. She did. He looked at the child standing before him. 42 years ago. The little girl smiled exactly as before. Then she quietly asked the question that drained every drop of blood from Boone's face. Papa, why did you leave me here? Boone could no longer breathe. His knees gave way beneath him. Mercer caught him before he struck the wooden floor. The little girl, Sarah, never moved. She simply stood there with the small bouquet resting at her feet, patiently, as though she'd already waited longer than any child ever should. Boone's hands trembled violently. No, he whispered again. You died. Sarah tilted her head. No, Papa, you left. The words cut through the room with terrifying simplicity. No accusation, no anger, just certainty. Mercer looked at Boone. You never told us you had a daughter. The old guide swallowed hard. I buried her. Sarah answered before Boone could continue. No, you buried a box. Silence. Every resident inside the boarding house slowly looked toward Boone. Not one of them seemed surprised. Not one questioned the child. It was as though they had all heard this conversation before, many times. Harold Bishop suddenly slammed both hands onto the dining table. Enough! This town is playing games. She's not your daughter. This is some kind of trick. Sarah slowly turned toward him. Her smile disappeared. For the first time, her eyes looked old. Far older than the face of an 8-year-old child. She quietly asked, "What year is it?" Bishop answered immediately, 1934. Sarah nodded politely. "For you." Nobody understood what she meant. Daniel Brooks looked toward one of the windows. His heart nearly stopped. Outside, snow was falling. Heavy snow. Only moments earlier, the valley had been covered in brilliant autumn leaves. He rushed outside. The others followed. The town had changed. Every tree stood bare. Roofs carried thick blankets of white snow. Ice covered the water pump near the square. The air had become bitterly cold. Mercer stared upward. Gray winter clouds filled the sky. What happened? Boone closed his eyes. The season changed. Daniel shook his head. In 30 seconds. Boone answered quietly. No. For us. Harold Bishop checked his watch again. The glass had cracked. The hands spun wildly, then stopped. December 18, he blinked. The date changed again, April 7, then October 3. The years continued rolling forward, faster, faster, until the crystal shattered. The watch simply fell apart. Mercer removed his own pocket watch. Its hands had disappeared completely. Only the ticking remained. Tick, 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 though nothing moved. A church bell echoed across the valley. One slow toll. This time, no one counted. Boone looked relieved. Good, it's learning. Mercer frowned. What is? The town. Before Mercer could ask another question, the snow vanished. Instantly, the valley returned to autumn. Golden leaves drifted gently through the air. The transition happened so smoothly it almost felt natural. Almost. They walked toward the church. Not because they wanted to, because every road now led there. Mercer noticed it first. Whenever he tried taking another street, he somehow found himself facing the church again. The town wasn't changing. The roads were. Daniel tested it. He walked behind the general store. 3 minutes later, he emerged beside the church steps. Harold tried crossing the square. He reached the church. Mercer followed a narrow alley between two houses. It curved once. Twice. Then opened directly in front of the church entrance. The building had become the center of every path. Boone stopped walking. It wants us here. Mercer asked quietly, "What happens if we go inside?" The old guide answered without hesitation. "We stop leaving." The church doors slowly opened. No one touched them. Warm yellow light spilled across the street. Gentle, inviting. Inside, voices laughed softly. Children played. Someone sang an old hymn. Mercer's heart tightened. The voices sounded comforting, safe, like coming home after years away. Daniel whispered, "I hear my mother." Harold quietly replied, "I hear my wife." Mercer closed his eyes. He heard something else. A family dinner. His father laughing. His younger brother telling stories. The exact sounds of one Thanksgiving evening in 1918. Every word. Every chair moving across the wooden floor. Every crackle from the fireplace. Perfect. Boone suddenly shouted, "Those aren't memories! They're bait!" The sound stopped immediately. The silence that followed felt offended. Sarah stepped onto the church porch. She looked toward Boone. "Papa, you promised you'd ring the bell." Boone looked as though every ounce of strength had left his body. Mercer slowly turned. "What does she mean?" Boone didn't answer. Instead, he removed an old leather journal from inside his coat. The cover was badly worn, its pages yellow with age. He held it out to Mercer. "I was never supposed to guide you here." Mercer frowned. "What? I came here before." Harold stared at him. "When?" Boone looked toward the church. 1892. Daniel frowned. "That's impossible." Boone nodded. "I know. I'm 104 years old." No one laughed, not because they believed him. Because for the first time, it explained everything. His knowledge. His fear. The strange things he'd said since the journey began. the way Sarah had recognized him. Mercer carefully opened the journal. The first page contained only one sentence, written in faded ink. "If anyone finds this, burn the bell before it remembers your name." He turned the page. The handwriting changed. The date read October 16th, 1892, exactly 42 years before. The first line made Mercer's blood run cold. "There were 4 of us when we entered Black Hollow." Mercer slowly looked up. There were 4 of them now. Just then, the church bell rang again, only once. But this time, Mercer heard something inside the sound. A whisper, soft, patient, close enough to breathe against his ear. It spoke only 3 words. "Thomas, your turn." The storm finally stopped before sunrise. Not because the clouds had moved away, but because there was nothing left for them to drown. Nathan Reed didn't remember rowing. Later, he would remember lifting the paddle. He would remember cold water splashing his hands. He would remember Daniel sitting beside him without speaking. But he could never remember how they crossed nearly 10 miles of flooded marsh. It was as though the swamp itself had carried them back. When daylight finally appeared, they weren't at the landing where they had entered. They were nearly 12 miles north. Standing beside an abandoned railroad bridge, no map placed anywhere near Black Cypress Marsh. Sheriff Walter Briggs found them shortly after noon. Only 2 men, 1 damaged canoe, no supplies, no survey equipment, no Professor Ellis, no Thomas Granger, no Henry Shaw, nothing. Nathan tried to explain. He really did. But every sentence sounded insane. There was a house. No house exists there. There was a woman. No women live inside that marsh. There were candles burning. You were missing for almost 5 days. Nathan stopped talking, because every answer created another impossible question. The sheriff organized a search party. 12 experienced swamp hunters, 6 deputies, 2 bloodhounds, 3 boats. They searched for 4 straight days. Nothing. No cabin, no trail, no footprints, no broken trees, no campfire. Not even the lake Nathan described. According to every map, that lake had never existed. The official report listed the missing men as presumed drowned during survey operations. Case closed. Daniel never argued. He signed the report, folded it carefully, placed it inside his pocket, then quietly left town forever. No one ever saw him again. Nathan stayed, at least his body did. His mind never truly returned. He stopped working, stopped speaking, stopped sleeping. Neighbors said he spent entire nights sitting on his porch, looking toward Black Cypress Marsh, as though waiting for someone or something. Months later, something stranger happened. Nathan began receiving letters. No return address, no stamp, no handwriting he recognized. Only a single sentence written across perfectly white paper. "You measured the wrong land." Every letter ended the same way. No signature. The sheriff assumed someone was playing a cruel joke. Nathan burned the first letter. Then another arrived. Then another, exactly 7 days apart. Always on Monday morning, always lying on his porch before sunrise. No footprints, no horse tracks, nothing. After the 7th letter, they stopped. Nathan thought it was finally over. It wasn't. 3 years later, a logging company purchased another section of swamp nearly 20 miles east of the original site. Different investors, different surveyors, different crew, different maps, only one detail matched. They disappeared too. 5 men entered. 1 returned. The survivor refused to describe what happened, except for 1 sentence repeated during questioning. "It wasn't trying to kill us. It wanted witnesses." That sentence was buried inside county records, ignored, forgotten, until decades later. In 1958, a university historian researching abandoned logging operations discovered both case files. He noticed something everyone else had missed. The coordinates written inside Nathan's notebook and the coordinates written by the second survivor were identical. Exactly identical. despite describing disappearances 4 years apart from locations supposedly 20 miles apart. The historian became obsessed. He spent 6 months comparing old land deeds, tax records, military maps, railroad surveys, church registries, everything. Eventually, he found one forgotten document hidden inside probate archives. A property transfer from 1849, not between people, between church authorities and someone whose signature consisted of only one symbol, 3 perfectly straight vertical lines. Nothing else. No name, no initials. Just 3 lines. The land described inside that deed covered exactly the same area where every disappearance had occurred. The document ended with one handwritten warning. Different ink, different handwriting, added years later. If the boundary stones are ever moved, the house returns. The historian disappeared 2 weeks later. His rental truck was found beside Black Cypress Marsh. The driver's door was open, the keys still inside. His notebook lay on the seat. Open. The final page contained only 6 words. I finally found where it waits. Nothing else. Today, satellite images still show something strange over that section of marsh. Survey aircraft regularly report compass failures. Boaters avoid the area. Old fishermen refuse to anchor there after sunset. None of them explain why. They simply say the same sentence generations before them always said. Some places don't belong to the living. For almost 65 years, nobody ever entered Blackwater Marsh again. The county quietly removed the old trail from official maps. Hunters stopped talking about the place. Older fishermen simply pointed somewhere into the cypress trees whenever someone asked where Blackwater Island had once been. Then they changed the subject. Some places survive because people remember them. Other places survive because people refuse to remember them. Blackwater belonged to the second kind. Samuel Harper never spoke publicly about what happened. Not once. When investigators questioned him in 1922, he told them exactly what they were capable of believing. 3 men disappeared. The swamp was dangerous. Fog became confusing. People got separated. End of report. Everything else stayed locked inside his mind. He married, raised children, worked as a guide until his retirement. But anyone who knew Samuel noticed one strange habit. Every night, exactly 15 minutes before midnight, he locked every door, every window, every curtain. Even during summer, even when it was unbearably hot. When his wife once laughed and asked what he thought might come inside, Samuel answered quietly, "It isn't trying to come in. It's trying to make me answer." She never asked again. His grandchildren remembered another strange thing. Whenever someone called his name from another room, Samuel never answered immediately. He always waited, counted silently, then replied. When asked why, he simply smiled. You always make the voice prove itself. Years passed. The nightmares became less frequent. Until October 3rd, Samuel was 93 years old, too old to hunt, too old to fish, too old even to leave the porch most mornings. That evening, his youngest grandson visited. The family watched old home movies, shared dinner, laughed together. By 10 o'clock, everyone had gone home. Samuel remained alone in his rocking chair, listening to crickets, watching darkness swallow the old Louisiana countryside. At exactly 11:47 p.m. he heard it, soft, clear, exactly as it had sounded 65 years earlier. Samuel, his entire body froze. Not from fear, from recognition. The voice had not aged, not one day. Again, Samuel. This time it sounded closer, somewhere beyond the oak trees. His heart pounded violently. He stood, walked to the front door, stopped, remembered, never answer, never follow, never believe. He closed his eyes, turned around, and went back inside. The next morning, his grandson found him peacefully sitting in the same chair. Gone. No struggle, no expression of fear. Only one unusual detail. His right hand rested gently on the old brass compass he'd kept since 1922. Its needle was still spinning. The family buried Samuel beside his wife. Most believed he died peacefully from old age. Only one person knew better: his grandson. Because while cleaning the attic, he found an old wooden box. Inside lay Samuel's journal. Never published. Never shown to anyone. On the final page, written only hours before he died, were these words: "If anyone reads this, understand something. The place is real. The island isn't haunted. It isn't cursed. It isn't evil. It is simply wrong. There are places where the world folded incorrectly, where time remembers different rules. If Blackwater ever appears again, leave. If someone calls your name, do not answer. If you find a house waiting for dinner, do not enter. If you see people smiling, look at their eyes, not their mouths. And if someone ever offers you land that seems impossible, ask yourself one question: who owned it before maps existed?" The journal ended there. No signature, no goodbye, only those words. In 1998, a state university conducted aerial photography across southern Louisiana. One graduate student noticed something unusual. In one frame, deep inside protected wetlands, there appeared to be a perfectly square clearing, exactly matching measurements from an old timber survey completed in No. The next photograph, taken only 11 seconds later, showed nothing. Just endless swamp. The clearing had vanished. The university blamed a photographic error. The student accepted the explanation. Eventually, but 5 years later, he received an anonymous envelope. No return address. Inside, one faded black and white photograph. 4 men standing beside 2 wooden boats. On the back, written in blue ink, the survey was completed. There should have been only 4 men, yet when forensic analysts digitally enhanced the image decades later, a 5th figure appeared. Standing in the trees, half hidden, watching, smiling. No historical record has ever identified him. Even stranger, every modern satellite survey of that section of Louisiana occasionally produces corrupted images. Perfect squares. Missing pixels. Blackwater where no water exists. Government agencies call them mapping errors. Cartographers ignore them. But locals still refuse to enter. Today, if you drive through that region, you'll occasionally find weathered wooden signs nailed to forgotten trees. No county seal. No official warning. Just 4 words carved by hand. DOTANSDIDOERTHEVOIC. Nobody admits making them. Yet every few years, someone replaces the faded signs with new ones. Maybe Samuel wasn't warning us about ghosts. Maybe he was warning us about something far older. Something that doesn't chase people. Something that simply waits patiently until curiosity does the walking for it. So, let me ask you one final question. If someone offered you a fortune to spend one night inside a place no map can consistently find, would you go? Or would you remember Samuel Harper's last lesson? Sometimes surviving isn't about fighting. Sometimes surviving means refusing to answer. What would you do? Would you take that chance, or would you walk away? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I really want to know.